Welcome to the Prodigal and the Priest podcast, a podcast about faith, sports, and two friends from different cultures.
Is he recording?
Here are your hosts, Joey Scansella and Father Paul Bechter.
Yes, I am recording. Our folks could hear that.
I thought I whispered it. Is the video recording as well?
Yes.
Sorry, every once in a while I have trouble with these headphones. It just totally throws me off.
I could tell. All right. Hey, Prodigal and the Priest, question edition. We answer your burning questions in your hearts, everybody. So let's jump into it. Got some intense ones.
Let's do this.
Just like
Bring it.
Intense. Okay, here we go. Allie asked a while back, she said, just want to get your take a little bit on what's been happening on TV and the news lately. Now, this was a little bit ago, and so you could, but this could apply to anything because something is always happening. But
True.
She talked about there's like a video came to her attention of a pastor who was invoking the name of God to place curses on opposing political party figures. I don't know. Did you ever hear about this?
I didn't hear about that.
But then she says, now my faith is and had always been incredibly important to me. But I have family members who don't have a relationship with the Lord and then look at stuff like this and turn to me and almost seem to question me on things like this. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, what would you advise me when it comes to defending the church, the name of the Lord, others, and to others who are seeing some people use the name of God to do actions like that or that. But I think really what the question is sometimes there's people that do things that are not in accord with the church or the Lord. And we as faithful Christians have to answer to that, to people who like to rebel against, like, well, see, look at what those Christians are doing, right? Like they turn it on you. And say, that person says they're a Christian and they just did this really mean thing, or they did this, and you say you are, I'm doubting you. I think that's what Allie's getting at. Allie, I apologize if that's not
misrepresented.
If I totally misrepresented you. I'm just hitting it on a broader perspective of saying, I think what she's encountering is saying there is this kind of crazy act of somebody, and they're saying, look at what you guys are trying to do. You're like, putting curses, trying to put curses on things or things like that, So,
okay. Yeah, I got some takes.
You got some hot takes?
Got some hot takes on this.
Go for it.
I got two quick stories and
I have 4 quick stories too. And
about 45 minutes. So maybe I'll trim it down to 43. Okay. So first of all, sometimes the church gets put in a position not through her own actions or through the actions of somebody who's going rogue, right? Who's not living the gospel or for some reason like not representing what the church should represent. And we have to answer for it. And just, it makes me think of Cardinal Ratzinger, before he became Pope Benedict, was in charge of the CDF, the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith. And I remember he did an interview one time about these like frozen embryos.
Right.
So like it's not okay. It's not in accord with God's law to like fertilize embryos outside of the marital act.
Right.
To do that artificially. But once you've got them, it's also not okay to do like surrogate implantation of an embryo. And what is it called? I something.
In vitro fertilization.
Yeah, IVF.
Yeah.
And so this journalist was asking him, saying like, basically the situation now is that some of these companies have just freezers full of fertilized human embryos that they've conceived artificially, but have not been brought to term in any mother. And you're saying that the church forbids surrogate motherhood in this way because it's artificial conception, and that's not in accordance with God's law. Aren't you being so restrictive? What are we supposed to do? You're also saying that we can't just pull the plug on those freezers full of embryos because that's causing the death of these nascent human lives. And like the reporter's question makes sense. He's saying that like the church has set up this impossible situation now. But Cardinal Ratzinger turned it back on him and said the church did not create this situation.
Right.
This is the culture. This is like the culture of death and the culture of pride. Can I call it that? Like technological pride, thinking that we can be masters even in a way that goes against God's law over life and death.
Right.
In all of this artificial conception stuff. Like, I mean, just to qualify, right? There are ways that we can use technology to aid us in every part of our life, including fertility.
Right.
But we can't do so in a way that goes against God's law. And if we create a situation like that, that's of our own creation. That's not God or his church or anything. And I thought it was really, it doesn't solve the problem, but I thought he was very justified in kind of getting angry and saying, why are you blaming the church for this? The church never told you to go against God's law in this way, and the church didn't create this situation. So I know it's a different thing we're talking about because we're talking about a minister of the church, or at least maybe a Protestant minister, we're not sure, but somebody who's speaking like as an authority in Christianity, who seems to be misrepresenting the church. But I'd say it's, even though it's in this official capacity, it's a similar kind of thing. Maybe it's not a perfect analogy, but there's something similar about the situation. That's one of them. I have another one I want to share about, like it's quite often. I wish it were more often, actually, but sometimes people will come back to the church who have left and will explain why they left, and sometimes they'll give a reason of, a priest said this to me, or I left because of the scandals in general, or I left because I was personally affected in some way,
right?
Or someone I know was personally affected by some way by the misconduct of a priest in some way,
right?
And there's a lot of different things, from like having a Catholic say, like, bless your heart, but since you're not Catholic, you're going to hell, or something like that. Like, saying something like that can turn people away,
right?
And there's more nuance to that needs to be said, but or just a priest telling somebody that something that they didn't want to hear and them not receiving it well. So it's, I'd encountered a lot of this already in seminary, but it wasn't until I became a priest that I started to see that sometimes there's multiple sides to this. And I had this experience in the hospital one time where I'll try and keep it as generic as possible, but where someone had drifted away from the church, had requested an anointing. You are allowed to anoint Catholics even if they're not practicing their faith,
right?
As long as they actually want it. But this person didn't seem to want it for themselves. They wanted it because it would please a family member,
right?
And that's problematic. That's not enough belief in the sacrament for me to be able to give it. And so I said, well, I sort of probed a little deeper and was like, well, I just need you to be able to say that you want this for yourself and you believe that God will work through this in some way, even if you're not quite with the church on it. Like, I can still give you the sacrament, even with just that kind of bare minimum. And I didn't explain it in that way, but that was kind of where I was coming from.
Right.
The person said, no, I'm not really sure if I do. So I said, okay, I'll pray with you for a minute if that's okay. And then I'll be around the hospital later during the week, because that particular summer I was sort of on call at one of the hospitals in Dallas for almost a month, just making rounds,
right?
And visiting patients as a priest. I found this person in a different room a little bit later in the week, so I hadn't heard from them. And a relative of this person was in there. I said, oh, hey, it's you. How are you doing? I never heard back from you. Is now a good time to come talk? The relative said, absolutely not. Like, get out of here, kind of thing. I was like, oh, okay. I have no idea what happened. And this relative cornered me by the elevator later and just started to lay into me. Like, really, I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
But said, like, my relative who is ill has had all of these problems and has so courageously endured all of these things for so long, and no one has made this person cry except for you and your unpastoral, exclusive men's club or old boys club, whatever it's called, church. And we're so glad that we left the Catholic Church a long time ago and found, compassionate Methodist pastor who would take care of us. And I was sort of in shock a little bit because I still wasn't sure, like, this is not at all the conversation I had with that person before. Yeah. It ended very well. And they were crying when I left after praying, but it was the kind of tears that come when, like, God is moving in that moment. I was praying for their healing. And so I'm not sure what happened, but basically this person railed at me for a good several minutes, which feels like a long time when you're in that. Yeah. And I didn't really say anything, tried to get a word in, and, like, I think there's been a misunderstanding, and then said, is there any way I can, try and clear this up? And no, I was banished from the situation. Yeah. They told me I need to go learn from the Methodists, and I wanted to say, like, it wasn't the time to joke, but I wanted to be like, actually, I did my hospital training under the Methodists. Right. But that wouldn't have been appropriate.
Yeah, that would have gone.
So, I prayed for this person, never saw them again, told the other chaplain, hey, I was banished from this room. I think this is what's going on. Yeah. Honestly, I think that, like, they have some other gripe with the church, and I just became a symbol of that. Yeah. But my experience was completely mischaracterized. My words, the conversation we'd had, everything about it. I had left on very good terms. I was fully expecting to hear back from this person, and something had happened in the meantime where the situation had flipped completely. Now, I know that's different than what we're talking. We're talking about a video where this pastor is invoking the name of God to curse something, and that doesn't, just hearing it doesn't seem appropriate. Yeah. Struggling to find, like, a place where that would be appropriate. Yeah. I think I can see maybe some good intention in there, but it still seems like probably an imprudent action, to put it mildly. But my experience in that hospital that one time taught me that, yeah, a lot of priests are jerks, and sometimes priests have a bad day and say something that they wish they could have back. Yeah. That happens, I think, all the time. Other times, they are completely mischaracterized. And I think it's important when we look at these kind of things just to realize that situations are often complex, and sometimes people hear what they want to hear, even if it's not what you're saying, or I guess what they don't want to hear. They're offended, even though you didn't say anything that was bad or even inappropriate for the situation. Right. It wasn't just like you were speaking hard truths, but you could have spoken them in a very compassionate, pastoral way. Yeah. And yet it tweaked their conscience because they knew that something, I don't know, sometimes people who are feeling guilty can lash out at others to kind of blame others. It can be sort of a very adolescent reaction on our part to do that. Right. Who knows exactly what was going on in this situation and many others, but it just taught me that, like, people can sometimes come and say, we left the church because a priest said this, and that might not be anywhere close to the whole story. Right. So to bring it back to this question.
And I got two thoughts.
Yeah. Actually, you give your two thoughts while I'm trying to remember what the question was, because I strayed so far.
Well, my two thoughts are, I think you're going to, any of us as Christians are going to encounter two things. One is, we don't like to hear this, but like John 15:18 says, like, remember when the world hates you, it hated me first. Yeah. Like, we're going to experience, like, hey, they crucified the Messiah.
Right. Sure.
Like, and we all did as well, right? And we will live with some of that. Like, there's times where you say the right thing, you think you do the right thing, and you're going to receive that hate. This other false thing that's attributed to St. Francis, I hate it, but I love the idea of it, even though it wasn't really a St. Francis thing, which is like, preach the gospel at all times, use words when necessary. I think the scholars all say he didn't really say that, but that is a beautiful sentiment that I think in these situations, like you said, sometimes there's no words that will ever make it okay for someone, or you can back out or redo or any of those things. And I think we're still called in a loving, charitable way to show our actions as Christian people. And what was that Gandhi quote? You ever hear that one that was like, I would have been a Christian if I actually met a Christian who lived out what they were taught. Something like that. Who knows if that even was a real... It's probably another...
Si non è vero è ben trovato. That's the Italian phrase. If it's not true, then it ought to be.
Exactly. Love it.
It's well found.
Those are kind of my thoughts in it, that we're all going to encounter those times. And family is family for life. And it's going to be... Just remember that. So don't...
Yeah.
Don't say anything you wish you were going to have to take back, and that could damage that even more. That sometimes, let's go Avengers. Sometimes it's about the end game here. Okay? I mean, there's a truth to that. Sometimes there is enduring the pain of
we're playing the long game.
Yeah, really. Some relationships, I've mentioned it with my neighbor, Scott. Great guy, but I really don't think he cares too much about what God thinks about certain things. And there's an end game there where it's like, okay, hey, let's have a beer. Let's smoke a cigar. Let's do, let's talk about our lawnmowers and how his lawn looks immaculate and my lawn looks not immaculate.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. And so if I only had a yard keeper. Anyway, that's all I got. Yeah. Anything else before we wrap up?
No, ultimately, part of this question is, what do I do when I don't know what to say? I feel like maybe I should do something or say something, but I don't know how to navigate this tricky situation. That happens with prudential decisions all the time. Mm-hmm. There's not always a clear right answer.
Right.
And when you come and ask the church for advice, the church can provide principles to act on, but you're the one who has to apply those principles to that situation. And that's a consequence of us being made in the image and likeness of God. It's part of our dignity that we have that responsibility, and that we have to make a decision and then accept the consequences, even if they don't go as we want it to. I think Joey's advice about not saying anything that you know that you'll regret is a very good starting point there, for just a measure of am I saying this in charity? Is now the right time? Do I have sufficient intimacy with this person to have this conversation?
Right.
But when it comes down to it, there may not be a clear right answer. And so that's where a life of prayer is very important. Mm-hmm. You may not receive a clear indication of an answer in prayer either, but if you are grounded in the Lord, you're praying every day, and praying for guidance to the Holy Spirit. If you are not doing anything that you know is wrong on purpose, God is going to guide you, and He's proven it again and again and again throughout salvation history that He can work with our mistakes. He can take a bad situation and draw a great good out of it. It doesn't mean that it's not a bad situation. But that He and His will are not to be outdone. That He's playing the long game even more than we are. So,
yeah. When God closes a door, He opens a window. We should just talk.
JP too. No, who said that?
No, it's just like one of those things that my mom had on her
Proverbs.
wall. You know, like
you had
growing
those
up.
signs growing up? I think everybody did.
We had those signs. We had footprints. The footprint prayer, like in Jersey, is everywhere, even in the non-Catholic homes, because you live at the shore.
Right.
And so it's like a man walked on the beach, and it's like everybody, and they have a little sand dollar like next to the image. Anyway, we've gone about too long on this. Okay, so I'm going to split up. Somebody asked two different questions in this. So I'm going to address their first one. This is anonymous. Hey, is there a difference between Latin Rite and Roman Rite? I hear these terms at times, but I'm not sure if they're the same or what they specifically mean. This is probably a question that could be answered through Google, but I'd like to hear it from you guys. So I just want to first toss off so the term Roman Rite can be used in liturgical rites by the Catholic Church, but it's far more widespread known as the Latin Rite. We're talking about the Latin Rite and then things like the Byzantine Rite.
Right.
But at times we do use things like, in the Roman Rite of that liturgy, or like this little document here and that. But yes, Latin Rite, Byzantine Rite. So Latin Rite, all of that is encompassed in one.
Synonymous with Roman Rite. Latin Roman means the same thing. Latin is a more common thing, way to say it.
Isn't that interesting though, that is more common than where the Roman Catholic Church?
Yeah. I don't know.
I didn't have the man.
Failed.
I don't know. Oh gosh.
He's trying to play a drop.
Gosh.
Doesn't know how technology works.
I can't even get it on. I'm the worst here. All right, whatever. I was gonna do, man. I
Gotta
don't know.
rejoice, celebrate the small victories.
Celebrate the small victories. This is gonna bother me the rest of the time. Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I think a lot of that stuff can be confusing for people, though.
Oh, yeah,
all
for
the
sure.
rights and that.
Yeah,
and
and
I don't know
even in a
anything to
Google
speak
search.
on that, on the rights. Anything?
Not really. It's kind of confusing. Like you got different, within the Roman Rite or the Latin Rite, you have two forms, the ordinary and the extraordinary form.
That's a good thing to distinguish and tell people.
So like sometimes people will refer to the extraordinary form as the Latin Mass, which is a fine way to refer to it. But the ordinary form is also the Latin Mass. It's just we normally say it in the vernacular. Confused yet?
Yes, slightly.
The standard.
There it is.
There it is.
Gotcha.
Man, I don't know. The standard edition, or I don't know how to call it. It's the Editio Typica, the typical edition. But the edition that is the foundation of all the other translations of the Missal is in Latin.
Yeah.
For the ordinary form.
Got it.
So even though most of the time you go to a Latin Mass, a Mass in Latin, it's going to be in the extraordinary form. That's just kind of circumstantial. You can easily, there's full permission, everything. It's kind of the baseline language of the church. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it. Okay. Editio Typica, whatever.
Nice. All right, one more. Joey. Okay. You get ones that are like, hey, Father Paul, you're amazing. You're spiritual dad. This is what I get. Joey, baseball is boring. I can't believe you love this sport. Prove me wrong. This is what I get.
This is awesome.
No,
I love it. I want to encourage this. I just affirm whoever sent that.
I want to defirm anybody who sent that. First off, this is what I say back to whoever doesn't have the courage to also sign their name and submit this question. So I should toss out this question because
maybe they don't know how.
It's a Google form. I'm pretty sure they know how. First off, I bet I'm going to use this analogy. Somebody told me once, baseball is like the game of chess. Chess is a well thought out, methodical game. And at times it can move fast, and at times it goes slow. And you take your time, and you have to dissect your opponent and their moves and different things like that. But most people aren't refined enough to appreciate chess, and they like checkers.
Ooh. Do most people like checkers, though?
Yes.
I think most people find checkers boring, too.
Like kids or adults or what? Like yeah, I don't think most adults are like, hey, you want to play a game?
Checkers.
Let's get out the checkers. Like, no, they're playing those games like, what are those like?
Angry Birds.
No, I was thinking that game. It's like Risk. You know, all those people love that game I hate.
Settlers of Catan. That was so big in the seminary.
Gosh.
I never played it even once, but it was.
That would be good.
That was like a
Kindle
weekly
for a
thing.
fire.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. So
All right.
that's what I would say
Just
to
like baseball bats would
is, and there are things that I'm sure could speed up the game, but I do think there is some purity to the game. And just like you look back at, people are like, oh, basketball has changed. All these sports have changed. Nowadays, people will be like, it's not the same from when Jordan played or this or that. I'm like, yeah, true.
It's also not the same from when like the first Canadian or whoever was throwing a basketball up into a basket that didn't have the bottom cut out of it.
Right.
Or so they had to get a ladder or something. And
or Abner Doubleday invented the game of baseball. I'm sure it's evolved a little bit from there.
Impressed, you know that?
Thank you.
Not going to fact check you.
Yeah, you should fact check me. It's true. So
I'll let our listeners do that.
There you go. So whoever submitted this, that's what I would say is it's the game I love. I love having to think of the scenarios that are going to happen. And that was a reason I was a catcher. I loved playing out. If this guy steals, I'm throwing here. This person's going to cut off. I got to be calling. Like, if you're actually playing it, I think it is a very exciting thing. I can understand, though, how it is not similar to football and basketball, where there could be an exciting dunk at any moment or a long touchdown run or all these things that you see that are a little bit more few and far between in baseball. But I appreciate it. Like, I love a game that is almost 0-0 until the ninth inning.
Stool.
And people are like, when's there going to be a home run? You know, like, that's just, I don't know. It's just how I grew up, and I grew up watching it. But
does it sadden you that it's basically strikeout or home run for a lot of the big hitters? That's kind of where the game has gone?
There is some sadness of, you know what saddens me is the shift.
Yeah.
Because that shows how inadequate athletes are at not like being a hitter who can place the ball wherever. And they're so used to just like trying to crank it and pull it that.
Yeah. But
we've gone over the head of every.
No, but let's go a little further over their heads.
Okay.
Because like, I know that there's, to make baseball more, bring it back a little bit to where it was. And also to, I guess, make it more interesting and have there be more hits or something. There are sometimes movements to ban the shift. But I wonder if it's better to let the game sort of like evolve to counter the shift. Like that's kind of like banning the 3-pointer when it was going to change basketball.
Exactly.
And instead, you know.
I'm right with you that I think
like
you need to have hitters
learn to hit opposite field.
Exactly.
And just, it might take a while for them to realize that even in the analytics, this is going to be more profitable for them than swinging for the fences.
And that right there, I think it ultimately comes back to an act of humility that these athletes aren't humble enough, because guess what? And if people don't understand, what they're doing is, if I hit the ball to the left every time, they're shifting everybody to the left and leaving the complete right side open, because they're like, he's only hitting it over there, and percentage says he's going to do that. If I was a coach or if I was that athlete, I would humble myself enough to bunt it to the right every time. But see, they're still not willing to do that. They're like, I'm going to swing for the fence and I'm going to hit it over them or any of that. Like, athletes aren't humble enough to actually do what is best for the team. And I think that's an aspect of Christianity that, you know, is similar, that we say, you know, like, we're not humble enough to say this is actually what it takes to, you know, like, step out of our comfort zone.
That's actually a pretty big deal. I didn't know where you're going at that point with like the really quick sort of turn out of left field, back to Christianity. But like Pope Francis says something in, what is it, Evangelii Gaudium,
Evangelium, yeah.
And it's similar to what Paul VI says in your favorite document.
Paul VI and Evangelii Nuntiandi.
Yeah, but like the basic idea in both these things is that we are our very nature should be to spread the gospel, should be missionary, and if there's something even structurally that's holding us back from that, it needs to adapt for the sake of that mission. That doesn't mean that everything is relative and that we change the faith or even that we, change the liturgy or anything like that. But like, if you think about parochial structures and just like, what does a normal parish look like? Like that needs to change if it's not serving the mission.
Right.
In the current context, which is our missionary field. And
absolutely.
If you are pulling line drives to the to the shortstop who is now back behind the third baseman because he's on such a severe shift.
Right.
Every time, like something needs to
he's
change.
Like a middle outfielder. Yeah. Exactly. Well, on behalf of that, on behalf of us, that was a good question. Although I resent the question altogether. Okay, so baseball's exciting.
Makes it an amazing question.
Thanks for those questions. Hey, make sure to submit them through our Gmail, through online, social media, St. Anne Parish /ptp.org, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
stanneparish.org/ptp, all those things.
I've never figured this
questions. All right, Joey Scancello, Father Paul Becker, take care.
God bless.
Baseball's the best.